right, welcome to a very special episode of The Diplomat, brought to you by diplomacybriefing.com. I'm Go Horns Go, or Ed Sullivan, as I've become known on the online community. And with me for the first time on video chat on this, whatever you call it, podcast or YouTube cast, is legendary world champion Chris Brand. Chris, thanks for joining.
No, thanks for inviting me.
So I've admired you for a long time, and I think I told you this during our, we both played on the top board at Carnage, that your play and watching that top board when you won the world championship was one of the things that inspired me to go back to diplomacy, which I had taken a break from. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you did mention that. I think probably Chris Martin deserves more of the credit because he put way more work into recording and editing those videos than we did in playing the games.
Well, especially when, and I'm going to link to the videos in this, but when he put the captions up of what people were saying during the negotiations, it took on a whole new level of, for novices like myself at the time, it's such a learning experience.
Yeah, he put an awful lot of effort into that, but I think the result is worth it. It's so, yeah, it's a great resource to have online.
So, just tell us what attracted you to diplomacy in the first place. I'm sure you've answered that question like a lot of times.
Well, so I started playing when I was a teenager. My dad is a board gamer, and so we had all sorts of board games at home, one of which was diplomacy. I do remember trying to play a 3-player game with myself and my dad and my brother. That was absolutely horrible. There's some rules in the book for about you play 2 countries each or something, and it's absolutely horrible. I mean, 3-player diplomacy anyway. And so I think we tried that once and then put the game away again. But apparently my dad had played the game a few times beforehand, but he wasn't a regular or anything. And then we were playing it at school. There used to be games in the lunch hour when I was sort of 16, 17, I guess, something like that. And it would literally be the first person in the room sets up the board. The first 7 people in the room get to play, and like 5-minute deadlines and like real hectic stuff, but a lot of fun,
Well, I noticed on the World Diplomacy Database, you appear to be the only person with 2 flags next to your name. You've got the Union Jack and the Maple Leaf flag next to yourself. Why is that?
Yeah, so I grew up in England. I moved to Canada in '96, and I'm a dual citizen now, Canadian citizenship and British citizenship.
So you get 2 flags.
Yep, that's why I get 2 flags. Yeah. So from a diplomacy point of view, it was very strange because I played online email games a bit, and then I moved to Canada, and I stumbled across a tournament that was being run in the local area. So I showed up to that and did okay. And when it was only sort of in the bar afterwards talking at that I discovered that there's this whole face-to-face hobby online, face-to-face hobby in England, and I could have been playing face-to-face tournaments and stuff all this time, and I just hadn't been aware of it at all. So,
what attracted you to the face-to-face aspect? I mean, I was mostly an online player, but you seem a little introverted to me. Is that a misimpression on my part that you would just go to a tournament?
I'm definitely more on the introverted side. Let's put it that way. But I mean, diplomacy is it's sort of a narrow scope, right? You're talking about that particular game, and even sort of more often than not, sort of a part of that game. So it's a very constrained environment, I guess. So it's a little different. I don't find that I'm shy at all when I'm playing the game, and the social scene. I mean, a lot of diplomacy players are pretty quiet. Like would describe themselves as introverts, let's put it that way.
I've seen it at both extremes.
Yeah, that's true too. But I say there's a lot of introverted diplomacy players, but you wouldn't know that in the bar after a face-to-face game or something, when everyone's describing how the game went and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, I think I'm introverted that can play an extrovert when I need to for my job or diplomacy or anything like that. But I think if I had my druthers, I would be alone.
A lot of it's about comfort level. I think I'm very comfortable talking about diplomacy and a game of diplomacy. So I think that allows me to then sort of be more extroverted.
Okay, so I've prepared some slides here. Let's see if I can do this correctly. But when I started getting into diplomacy, the article on Grantland, Diplomacy, the Game of the Alpha Nerds, you were a tragic character in this article that explains when Thomas Haver stabbed you for a solo. And I remember reading this, and I just viewed myself as probably in your shoes, not Haver's shoes. Gotta describe this a little bit more. Is this the full story that we got here in the article, which I'd recommend everybody to read if they haven't done so?
Um, yeah.
That at the end it goes, "You were crestfallen," which I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I was. I mean, so a little bit of background here. Thomas, he played a lot of Dixiecon. He played at Dixiecon lots of times before. He was quite well known there. This was my first Dixiecon tournament. So I'd heard about Thomas, but we'd never played before. And what I'd heard was that he was a really solid alliance player, finds a good ally and sticks with them forever. And I guess I gambled a little bit too much on that. So yeah, I mean, I was very happy with this Juggernaut alliance, and it was going extremely well. And I just got overconfident in the alliance. I felt it was a solid alliance, and that he wasn't going to stab me, whatever happened, and that was wrong. He had more of the killer instinct than I thought.
So I noticed in your interview on DBN before the top board started at Carnage that, I mean, I think you said after you won your world championship, you'd have to ask your wife, but you feel at least you've become less competitive. I mean, why do you play diplomacy now? It seems like you're playing it for the fun, for the enjoyment. You've proven what you need to prove.
Yeah, I went through a stage before I won the world championship when I was really I was very competitive, and that was my goal, was to like win stuff. And I went to a point when I had lots of seconds and thirds at tournaments and then never won a tournament. So I was looking to sort of see what am I doing wrong? How do I improve my game? Doing lots of research and stuff like that. In fact, the previous Chicago tournament that I went to, not 2016, the one before that, I deliberately tried to play much more aggressively and played completely outside of my comfort zone, and it really didn't work for me. I got worse results, possibly just because I wasn't used to it, something like that. I don't know.
Anyway. I mean, you're totally right. You know your game better than anyone, but this is the World Diplomacy Database listing of results all the way in the major tournaments, I guess, before you were number one. A lot of 2s and 3s there.
Yep. And even now, I mean, I think I think World Championship in 2016 was my first tournament victory, and I think I've had one other since then. So I haven't won a lot of stuff, really. I've won the one that counts, but
you won the one that counts.
But since winning Worlds, it's like, well, yeah, I could win it again, but there's not quite, it's not quite the same if you're playing to win it again than if you're playing to win it the first time. So I kind of feel like, yeah, I've achieved that, and I'm much more now trying to sort of build the hobby and play for fun and stuff like that. And if there's too many players and they need someone to sit out, then I'll sit out, let someone else have a game, or if they need someone to play 2 boards, I'll do that, because I play for fun, and I play for the friends that I've made in the hobby, particularly the face-to-face hobby. I would have to say that the majority of my friends are people I've met playing diplomacy face-to-face. So, when we meet each other at a tournament, that social side is a big thing.
And you've written the software, if I'm not mistaken, for the DBN guys.
Not for DBN
tournaments.
Guys. Yeah, I've written. So it was originally intended to be so that people who couldn't be at a face-to-face tournament could still sort of follow the tournament. That was kind of my goal. I was actually sat in a bar and there was some sports on the TVs in the bar, and I'm looking at it and there's all these statistics coming across the bottom and sort of news about stuff and what, you know, all the explanation about what's going on in the game. And I'm like, you could totally do that for diplomacy. So that's kind of what it started out as. And then it turns out that if you're going to display all that information, then you need it to know everything about the tournament anyway. So it sort of grew into tournament management software that can seed boards and assign players to powers and all that kind of stuff as well.
So go ahead.
Tournaments now, so.
I really enjoyed an article you wrote after your World Championship. I think it was for Diplomacy World. So I hope I don't get sued for copyright infringement here, but it's your word, so you can go ahead. But I mean, you put a simple formula. I mean, you've got to go to get a chance. You know, you got to play to get onto the top board, and you have to win the top board. It reminded me of playing baseball with the old adage, see the ball, hit the ball. You got to do the simple stuff.
I mean, honestly, this was partly because so many people I heard was sort of saying they're not doing well. And then you look at how often they're attending tournaments and things. And it's like, well, if you'd play more, then you'd probably do well, you know, because just numbers, you know. I think it was my 9th World Diplomacy Championship that I actually won. So, you know, some of it's just numbers. keep
well, and actually,
you get lucky.
I really enjoyed, reading what you've just talked about here, which is this idea of when you were being very competitive, it wasn't working out, but when you wanted to relax and enjoy yourself, it worked out. And I guess in diplomacy, what I learned on the top board of this tournament, I was on the top board of the Nexus online finals, one of them, is I didn't appreciate just the amount of popularity contest it is. So if you're an enjoyable, pleasant person to be around, that could be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Top boards are very different to regular, like to a house game or a game outside a tournament, or even the qualifying boards in a tournament. Just because there can be only one. One person's going to win that game, and the other 6 people are going to be disappointed. At some point, players realize that they can't actually win. So then comes, well, what's my secondary goal? Depending on how the tournament's scored, they might still want to do as well as they can for themselves, right? Because often there's, the points that you score on the top boards will still go to influence your tournament score. But honestly, a lot of people who play tournaments, it's first or nothing. They don't care if they come 2nd or 7th or 29th. It's not a big deal. If I haven't won it, then it doesn't matter. So you then get into that sort of king-making thing. Well, I can't win, but I can choose whether that guy or that guy wins. And this person was horrible to me early on, whereas this one, I've got nothing against. So I would rather that person won than that person. And a lot of top boards come down to that. The year that Doc Binder won Worlds, he had an enormous power just because everyone liked him, basically. No one liked anyone else, but everyone liked him. And so everyone was just like giving him dots left, right, and center. Yeah.
I think he was playing France. He may have soloed, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he did solo. My memory is not what it used to be, so I'm hesitant to sort of quote things like that.
Well, see, you were there. I only read about this stuff, so it's difficult when you read it to catch up.
Yeah, if I was on that board, I might remember it better. But
so coming on a top board, I really did. My only preparation, other than I played with almost all the players except for you, and I knew I've almost memorized your World Championship game. I've never played with Bill, but I played another game with Adam, but I didn't do much. But I just thought, in terms of preparation, I just have to relax and be myself and be comfortable and not try and push too hard on people. But is there a sort of preparation? I mean, my God, you're awfully tired, even virtually on a top board. That's what I discovered, is how exhausted I was.
Yeah, I've approached games like that in a number of different ways over the years. I've definitely done in the past. I've done some research on who I'm up against. You know, you often know the night before who's going to be on that top board. If there's someone I don't know, I have sort of looked up. Well, so you know, is this like their first time on a top board? Are they experienced at this kind of thing? You know, the World Diplomacy database is very useful for that sort of thing, for sort of getting a bit of an insight into who you're playing against. Honestly, though, getting a good night's sleep is one of the main things, if you can. Sometimes, particularly years ago, I used to get very little sleep the night before a big game because I was like nervous about it even before it had happened. So, but yeah, I mean, getting a good night's sleep, getting enough coffee in the morning, or whatever your
It's a tea, actually. I was educated in an English school in the Middle East, so I grew to like tea.
Oh, I'm the same. I'm not I probably drink like 1 or 2 cups of coffee a year, but I have to have my cup of tea in the mornings.
I'm with you, and of course, I remember the spring. I remembered this move, and I went ahead and screenshotted it from Chris Martin's video. I'm sure he'll appreciate the still of him. But from spring 1901 of your World Championship, so I knew you had. This was about the extent of the research, other than knowing that you had won, that I had remembered. But maybe wasn't the best idea, since I had 3 misorders in the game, to have been drinking scotch, but I thought that was the only way it was going to keep me calm. Although it messed up, as we'll talk about a little later on.
I found people, yeah, some people definitely, you know, a drink or two improves their game a bit, but you've got to be, there's a point where it starts to crash very quickly, right?
I don't think I crashed, thank God. I was hoping it was a little bit like bowling, but it wasn't really. I didn't get better as I went along. But,
right. I've seen some people who, you know, they're drinking through the game, and by 1905, their orders are just all over the place.
As is their speech and pronunciation.
Right. Yep.
So, did you have? I mean, you know, a lot of this game, to be honest, is sort of a exercise to help me become a better player. This is why I do this, and I want to learn from the very best. And I really had a great feeling after our initial conversation. But tell me internally what your approach to me was. I know you didn't know me at all. I knew you knew Nikolai. I knew you knew who's playing Russia, Adam who's playing Turkey, Bill who's playing England. And I think you said you played with Farron. So I was an unknown quantity. Did you have any, you know, was I someone that you thought you could use? Or tell me your approach.
You were it was actually interesting because you were in the East, you were the person I didn't know. I knew Adam and I knew Nicola. They're both very strong players. I'm you know, can't take anything for granted playing with them. You can guarantee that anyone on a top board on a tournament like Carnage is going to be a strong player. But you know, I didn't know how you. I have a much better insight into how Nicola plays and how Adam plays. Whereas you were you know, obviously you know what you're doing, but apart from that, I don't know sort of how are you like an alliance player, or are you sort of a steady player, or do you sort of, it depends on the situation, all that kind of stuff. Farron, I played a game with earlier in the tournament, and she came across as pretty solid alliance player. So, and when I spoke to her early on, she seemed quite happy with the idea of us both leaving each other well alone. You know, you do well in the West, I'll do well in the East, and then, you know, we'll worry if we have to worry about who gets Munich or Warsaw, then fine. You know, we'll talk cross that bridge when we get there, kind of thing. Which is how I like to play Italy. I think that's good for both Italy and France. So, so I was comfortable with that, which means that I'm going to be concentrating on the East. I may need to keep one fleet back, but I don't need to worry too much about French fleets coming into the Mediterranean. So given that, I know the way Adam plays the game, I wasn't too worried about a long-lasting RT in this game. One of the things that so I guess my preference is generally to, as Italy, is generally to ally with Austria, because I feel like it's a good alliance. And also, if we're going to go a bit further than that, my preference would usually be to kill Turkey early, because
Their corner power.
Yeah, if you don't do it early, then you're not going to do it at all. So
right.
Once they get to 5, it's probably too late to kill them, right? The best you can hope for is to keep them at 5. And particularly with Adam in Turkey, that was a big worry for me. So I was naturally inclined to work with you. Ideally, I think the 3 of us taking out Adam would have been a very good approach for me. And I think it also would have been good for you and good for Nicola. So,
and then after that, what would you have been your preferred method as Italy? Take out Austria, or you move west and I go against Russia? How do you? I mean, does it just depend on game for you?
Yeah, at that point, particularly on a top board, it would really depend on how things have gone elsewhere in the board, elsewhere in the game. If like the West resolves quicker than the East, then I would probably want to turn West fairly early because I mean, if nothing else, you're worried at that point that the rationale for France not going into the Med is no longer there. If she'd got a solid ally in Bill, perhaps, and they killed Germany very quickly, then I'm worried about those French fleets coming down. I want to get the fleets there first. On the other hand, if there's a very balance of power type game in the West, then I could still play that 2 ways. I mean, yes, I could pile into you, but also if I'm comfortable working with you, we can do something. I can push up through Turkey into Russia, or you can take Russian dots and I can take your dots behind you with your agreement. There's lots of different ways of playing it. There's also Germany, of course, piling through the center into Germany. Austria can do that.
How should one think? I did not know until 10 minutes before the game started that this would be ending in 1907. How should that have changed? Not just my solo. How should a player approach a timed game on a top board?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I was thinking this was a time unlimited game, and I posted something to Discord sort of that morning saying, so this ends in 1907, right? Thinking that I was joking, and then the response was, yep, that's right. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad I asked that. To me, it makes a lot of difference in the way the game plays out, because if it's ending at the end of 1907, then 1906, 1907 tend to be, sort of everything that's gone before that point is kind of off the table, and you're just looking at, okay, I've got dots. 4 moves. What dots can I get to in those 4 moves? And you tend to see more of a balance of powery game. You also can't be as patient, right? If you're in a time unlimited game and you're Turkey, if you can get to that 5 dots and then sit on that for a while, you've got plenty of time. You can start to improve that in 1907, 1908, and grow and grow and grow and still top the board. But if it's a 1907 game, you've got to be a little bit more aggressive. You can't afford to just sit there and be as patient.
And I think we saw that debate erupt sort of during the game and afterwards a little bit, because we had played, not you and I, but not against each other, but in the tournament there had been 2 rounds that ended in 1907 under Bangkok scoring. I did well in both of those, and my strategy in both was pure American aggression and power with an ally. And Nicola was very adamant that, look, on a top board in a time limited game, and he's European, so I know they do balance of power. You've just got to stay in there. You've got to be available to get those dots in the last 2 years. And when you destabilize or try and resolve a situation too early, that can be problematic.
Yeah, I don't think there's one way to approach a 1907 game. I mean, the European, if you play in Europe, they do tend to play much more balance of power type game. So there aren't really the long-lasting alliances or anything. But on the other hand, I've seen usually North American players go there and play an alliance game and be very successful because, partly because it's not expected, right? You see, say you're England and France and you're allied, you're taking some German dots. Once you've taken sort of 2 or 3 dots from Germany, everyone else on the board expects one of you to stab the other, and then when you don't, you take another 2 dots from Germany. You can then end up at the point where one of you guys is going to top that board for sure because you're sticking with that alliance. And then the question is who, of course, which is always the difficult bit. So I don't think there's one way to approach it. I think it does depend. But you've definitely got to have that end point in mind all the time. Right from the start, you've got to be thinking, okay, how far can I get in 1907? What's achievable and what's not achievable? Which dots can I get to and which dots can't I get to?
So just a little background on this. In the spring of 01, I thought, we had agreed that you'd move to Trieste, you moved to Tyrolia. And that did erode in my mind. I think it is funny how they captured it on, Siobhan did. She goes, so Ed was mad that he didn't move to Trieste in spring 1901. I expected you to have Trieste at the end of the fall because Turkey, I assume, would have bounced you out of Serbia. But two backstories here as I take apart my game. One is I told Nicola that you were moving to Trieste. I played with him 5 times, and I actually thought he would be okay with that. And he seemed right off the bat, he accepted it, but you could tell, I played with him enough to where you could tell he didn't think it was the best decision. So in my head, I was thinking, why is that? Maybe I was reading too much into that. And then I had a very good conversation with Adam. I was pretty sure you'd move to the Aegean after our conversation. And what I was really, when Adam said move to the Ionian, I was really trying to get Adam to bounce Nicola in Romania and Ben to bounce Nicola in Sweden. And the idea would be that Russia and you would not get any builds. Adam makes the argument, I need 2 builds, blah, blah, blah. And, so I said, okay, but if you're me for a second, forgetting the part that it's really bad to, stab you in fall of 1901, but if you're going to make just a practical decision, would you have preferred theoretically, Russia and Italy to get 0 builds, or Russia, as it turns out, they got 2 and Turkey got 2?
So first of all, I don't think it was a bad decision to stab me. I think given I messed up my spring 1901 moves is what it comes down to, and this was me getting what I deserved from that. I mean, I thought I knew I was taking a chance here.
Why did you do it? Why did you move to Tyrolia?
Why did I move to Tyrolia? I wish I knew. That's the really weird thing. I was something came out of my conversation with Germany that I can't put my finger on. Honestly, I think I wasn't very awake. I think Tyrolia is kind of my default move here. I like Venice to Tyrolia as an opening move. And I don't think I thought it through enough as to what the consequences were.
I mean, I wasn't too paranoid about it because you moved to Apulia.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
But it got me thinking,
yeah.
Is this guy fully on board, or is he, and that was going through my head, probably wrongly, because I really just enjoyed our conversations. I didn't think at any time you're being deceptive. It just freaked me out a bit.
No, I wasn't being deceptive. And honestly, we had talked about me moving to the Aegean, and given that we talked about me moving to the Aegean, I absolutely should have moved Venice to Trieste in spring 1901. So that was entirely on me. That was my fault, and I messed that up. So I don't think so. I think it was perfectly reasonable for you to attack me here. I think you're right that giving Turkey 2 builds is not ideal for you, for sure. Um, and if you could have arranged that he bounced Nicola in Romania, that would have been much better. My
With
guess
no
is
bit, and he can't build in Sevastopol if he's
right.
bouncing him in the black. I mean, I was, but
Yeah, I
sometimes
mean, I'm not at all surprised that Adam decided he would rather have the dot and let Russia build as well, rather than just keep them both down on nothing, and you be the guy who's growing in the east, basically.
So what
um,
Nicola told me, or he wrote, I can't remember which one it was, is that when I told him you were moving to Trieste, his immediate fear was we would have a very strong AI Lepanto that would destabilize the East too quickly. As it turns out, we had an AP that destabilized the East
right.
maybe too quickly uh, and allowed the West to form. And for the game meta, this is the thing that I keep going back to. When you lose these things, you go back, what could I have done better? And your initial instinct mine was to say, oh, well, France opened themselves up. There's not much I could have done. But this is the second time I played Austria in an important game where I had strong alliances early and resolved or almost resolved the East very quickly that caused the West to totally uh, get it together and puts me in a second place position. And I haven't played enough diplomacy to think about how resolution of one side of the board can impact the other. And I think this was Nicola's point that that's why he prefers the balance of power part.
Yeah, that's absolutely a thing. The early game tends to be the West plays in their side and the East plays on their side, but the experienced players at least are watching what's happening on the other side, because once someone gets eliminated on one of those sides or almost eliminated on one of those sides, then those remaining powers are going to be looking at the stalemate line. And the last thing you want is them to get to the stalemate line before you do, right? And get across the stalemate line before you can hold it. So yeah, you do often see if one side resolves very quickly, it has a major factor on the way the other side plays out. And you will see you'll see two powers that are throwing it, they're going hard at it with a battle, and then all of a sudden one turn you'll see both of them sort of withdraw and start throwing units to the stalemate line as well. In high level play, you'll see
that. Ironically, on this move here in the spring of 1902, if you remember, we had just two things to talk about. One is you told me that you were covering Naples with Apulia, so I thought the Grecian convoy would not succeed. As it turns out, it does. But the other is a very interesting conversation with you that you asked me about afterwards, where you point out, hey, you can put Nicola into Bulgaria and you can put me into Greece. Turkey's effectively, his two armies are, piffed, and, or I guess one, yeah, the piffed. And, well, one can go to Khan. Yeah, but, we're in a massive dominating position. And I said, I'm in. And I was in. I was worried that it would hurt my board reputation to shift so quickly and show my inexperience by doing it. But I shouldn't be afraid to make a good move. That was in my head. Even if it is looking bad, even if I had lost trust with you, I thought maybe we could rebuild it. But as it turns out, the timing nature of Backstabber, I didn't have a timer on, was critical, because by the time I entered those orders to do precisely what you had suggested, the orders had already processed. And it's just an unfortunate event of fate.
Yeah, this was this was the second key point in this game for me, because I really felt like that was my chance to basically still have play in this game. And I mean, in all honesty, I think we just We definitely talked about the convoy of Greece to Naples, and I think I said to you something like, "You obviously don't want to convoy Greece to Naples because you're basically giving Adam all of Italy, you know."
Right.
um, and then, so sort of from there, it went to, well, what could we do together? You know, you've already given Adam 5. That's, you know, that's not terrible, but let's not get into any bigger. And the fact that, I mean, my orders were kind of the same anyway. But looking at the position, I'm like, actually, you've got a really good chance here because we can get rid of both those Turkish armies. And I honestly, when I was talking to you about that, that seemed to me like, you know, yes, it pretty much felt like my last chance to have a play in this game anyway. But regardless of my own self-interest, I actually felt like it was the right thing for you to do at this point as well, because you know you've got a growing turkey there, probably growing a little bit more than you should be comfortable with.
Right.
Now, if you hadn't convoyed him into Naples, then it's probably manageable. You know, if you'd taken Tunis instead, then that's fine. But I kind of felt like this was a better move for you. Um, my feeling was the thing you shouldn't be doing is putting that Turkish army in Naples, which is what you chose to do. But I mean, obviously, I haven't got exactly the same picture of the game that you have at this point. So yeah, I mean,
Well, part of it was in for a penny, in for a pound. I felt like
yeah.
Adam had no options other than me. Um, you know, and so I thought he was being honest with me. As it turns out, he was being honest with me. If you look how the game played out, about you know, and I went up 2 on him during a while, and he let that happen. And the whole time, my argument is this, which is, Adam, every single player on the board says you're going to stab, so I have to be ahead, you know, some amount, because that's our incentive to work together. And
At the same time, though, I was surprised that alliance held together as long as it did, because knowing Adam, I think he's trying to play a little bit differently. But anyway, regardless of that, Nicola's reaction to that, though,
very
probably
frustrating.
the game, right?
Well, it's this move first. He was upset because this is the first lie I made to Nicola, and not just the first lie in this game, the first lie in 5 games
Yeah.
that I played with him. He and I think, have shared 3 board tops, and you know, in preliminary games where there are a lot of Carnage scoring, so there wasn't, you know, a massive incentive to to take the lead. So I have a good feel for not just how good he is, but you know how he plays. And I thought maybe I could take advantage a little bit of Nicola because you know he knows I've never lied to him, right? So, but the lie here I think was a bad one. Adam forced me because he was very worried about Aegean moving to Bulgaria, supported by Romania, which is why I support instead of support Nicola down in. But I think Nicola accepted that because you know he's an experienced player. He got it. He saw what was happening. He's very mad at me about getting Turkey on the boot. But this is where I lost Nicola this season right here, because right. I had gotten, you know, I see what France is doing, and I think that's what I said. I said, Russia, come on board. And I was really trying to talk. At this point, I thought, can I somehow manage this to where Turkey continues to move west? I don't stay away too far from Adam, but I've got northern armies that can maybe be useful with a collapse in Germany, and give Nicola, you know, chances up north. I was, you know, we agree on a set of moves. Nicola says, look, if you don't do exactly what you're saying you're going to do, he's talking to me, and he says it in front of Adam, I'm going to throw the game to England. And in my head, I heard that, but I didn't necessarily believe it because I thought his competitive nature would be, and he said later on he didn't really mean it, but you know, that he still thought he was in it. But the way I processed that was, okay, then it really is a race for Moscow between England and the AT. One that I thought, given the unit position, we could win on, so I would take the risk. But this popularity contest comes back, I think, this second set here to just devastate me, because England now wants to prop up Russia. Russia wants to help England. And you knew from all the problems we were having now with France, I mean, what we're going to do.
Yeah, I've invited Farron over. I basically said, if you can send an army and a fleet or two fleets my way, then I will do my best to help you into any dots that I can. I asked her to. She was actually going to support Venice, I think, the previous turn, and I said to her, "No, I'm vacating Venice. Please move to Venice, and it'll either bounce or you'll get in, and that's either's fine with me." So yeah, it was. That was very much I was fighting the AT and I needed someone else to come in anyway. And I would rather she had my dots than you did at that point. So,
I don't blame you, but ultimately you're also giving Bill the dots by doing that.
Yep. But yeah, again, again, the popularity contest, I'd probably rather Bill wins than you at this point.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, no, I don't suggest you should be invested in me. I wouldn't be if I were you.
That's a little unfair. I mean, I honestly, I wasn't that annoyed with you because I thought you played, I certainly didn't blame you for the initial stab of me. And yeah, I thought you were taking a big risk by putting Adam into Naples, but you're playing the game the way you're playing the game. And again, it doesn't hurt. The reason I asked you about that particular turn was because I felt like I'd done a good job of selling those moves, and that you should have been convinced, and I wanted to know whether it was my failure or whether it was something else, So anyway, I wasn't, there was no hard feelings from that point of view.
Well, this is the part of the game where you can look at the board, but being in the room is a different thing. Adam's trying to work with Farron, obviously, because she's got he's got problems moving west. He's talking to Bill. He's talking to everybody. I mean, I'm talking to nobody at this point. This should have told me how isolated I was, except you. You came in and talked, and I think I appreciate your gentlemanly way. You can, after this set of moves, I think we were just in the same room together where I was just talking to you about the meta of the game and what was happening. And I felt like that was a very genuine conversation that almost no one would have ever done. So I had things like that I remember.
Yeah, I had from this point on in this game, I had lots of time when I was just by myself at the board and other people were off talking to each other. And then I also had all sorts of conversations, sort of strategic type conversations with all sorts of people, just because, to some extent, I'm almost a neutral party at this point, because it's like, I don't have anything in this game anymore. I'm obviously going to be dead at some point in the not too distant future. But I enjoy talking about diplomacy. I'm quite happy to give my thoughts on the game. So yeah, I'll generally tend to do that if my game's going badly. And I have actually had people keep me around just for that reason. Yeah, I'm down to one unit and they could take the dot, but they're like, actually, I kind of like having Chris around to bounce ideas off and things. So I'm not going to take that dot right now. I'll save that one for later.
Well, you can serve as a witness that to two things at this point in the game. Right before this set of moves, I don't think I could have pressed Farron any harder than to see how open she was and that this was all going to end badly, as well as try to convince after the stab not to take Rome. Your fleet was more valuable, and I view it as a failure in diplomacy on my part. But I mean, she was pretty, as we would say in poker, pot committed as well. Like I was with the AT at some stage, so I understand. But this is the second thing I think for me. France still committing south and east is going to. I was only worried about the English stab of France. I thought it was good for me in keeping Turkey a little locked up.
Yeah, I think looking at this board position, I think that's the right thing to be worried about at this point. She's basically gone all in with the England's not going to stab me, and that's well, obviously that was unwise, but yeah,
Well, one of the things I've learned playing more of these face-to-face games is uh, that well, in online games where there's 24 or 48-hour turns between rounds, sometimes you don't want to raise an idea too early because it's like a game of telephone. It'll get around and
mm-hmm.
you have to go through several iterations. But in face-to-face play, you have to have a plan of what you're going to do. Like say in the West, when one power is almost eliminated, you have to know well before, how to approach that. And that's always the concern. As the Bill had a plan, or at least he says. I guess I saw his interview that if she had built complete breath, he would have gone after Russia. But curious enough, that's how these things change. They change on a dime.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're right that you can't sort of the 48 hours to sort of think about a move and discuss it with everyone and get everyone's viewpoint and what's likely to happen here does make a lot of difference. Whereas in 15 minutes, you've got to have a plan sort of all the time, I think. And then, yes, you might alter that plan based on what people tell you or what you hear is going on or how, your perceptions of what everyone else is going to do. But you've got to at least have a fallback plan, some idea of what your goal is at this point.
It's been a real challenge for me online because online I can put in the perfect move set. I can sandbox 100 different variations of what's going to happen. So my tactics aren't incredibly poor. Uh, Whereas in face to face, your brain has to operate at a faster level. It's why I'm playing a lot of speedboat games, trying to improve tactically on the fly.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always been quite good at, just the sort of seeing the tactical possibilities and often sort of there's sort of 2 or 3 decent combinations of orders that just sort of stand out to me straight away, and then sometimes it's, well, if I try this one and it's wrong, then we're in this position, and if I try this one and it's wrong, then we're in this position. So therefore, I'll weigh them up accordingly. But yeah, I've also been playing lots of gunboat games recently, partly because it's a good way to practice that sort of that quick perception of the position and what the tactical options are. And I try with my gunboat games. I try and spend as little time on them as possible. Literally pull up the map, look at what the last turn was.
Go.
And I'm not as good at it as I want to be. Sometimes there's a position that I get sucked into and I'm like, oh, I could do this. Oh, or I could do that. And what happens if this happens? And you end up spending half an hour on it instead of 2 minutes. But I still have that goal of like, I should just be able to pull it up, put the orders in, and then move on to the next game.
I appreciate you saying that. The thing about face-to-face play, though, that I like is in online play, when you make a mistake or you get stabbed, you have 24 or 48 hours to obsess about it. But in face-to-face play, you just got to move on. If you make a misorder, you have to move on. If something happens to you, I don't think you can be successful without having a short-term memory.
Yeah, in my book, you save the obsessing over it until the game's over, and then you spend the next 24 hours obsessing over. If I'd done something differently in spring 1901, then this game would have gone very differently.
Well, look, I believe you won a world championship, and if I'm not mistaken, you had 2 misorders. I don't know if they were intentional or not, but it seemed that they were misorders. And there were other times, because the turns were being adjudicated in person by hand, there were mistakes made that the backstabber format wouldn't have made, and you had to have to roll with it.
Yeah, I have a bit of a reputation for but for misorders, but my orders seem to range between completely ridiculous and extremely good, and no one knows what they're going to get on a given turn. And to some extent, that works for me, I think. I think I'm also very good at playing the board as it is. You know, sometimes you get into that mindset of where you think you know what's going to happen and you're planning ahead a little bit. And then when it turns out that what actually happened isn't what you thought was going to happen, it can be very difficult to throw that original plan or throw the right amount of that original plan away and, you know, reevaluate what's the board that I'm playing on now and what's the right thing for me to do now, rather than what looked like it was going to be the right thing to do a year ago or a season ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I wish I had that ability. I mean, that's great.
It's something you can develop as well. And it applies to, that's one of my things that applies to real life as well. You should always be trying to play life as it stands rather than as you thought it was going to be or as you wish it was.
Wow.
I guess the
So,
poker, you play the cards you've got, not the cards you hoped you would have or something.
well, that's true. I mean, and I've you know, I've played a lot of poker too in my life, so those skills are useful. Let me ask you what your your thought was. So we're before the spring of '05 moves, and I think you saw this all play down on DBN. This, Adam brings up the idea to me of flipping a coin to see who can grab each other's dots because it's looking pretty bleak for anyone not named Bill at this moment. I immediately liked the idea. I wouldn't have mind flipping the coin right then. But then he was very careful to say, oh, but let's see how everybody is in '06, And so this put in my head this idea that he might be trying to make a move on me to improve his position and we wouldn't do this coin flip thing. And so I make the move here, which, against Adam. And he got me in a room and he said, how do you think you can win with this move? And I said, I don't think I actually can win, but I don't know how I can win without trying to do something. I said, it's not a more than 50% chance I win the game with this. It's just a series of lesser odds. I think I told him 30% versus 0%. I'll go with 30 over 0 any day. This coin flipping idea, David Hood said it was a thing back in the day. Have you heard of it? Has it happened to you at any time?
I don't think I've ever come across that in a game. I've used coin flips to determine my individual moves, but never something like that. I don't think. That's quite a fun psychological thing when you're staring at the board and the person you're fighting against is there as well, and you've tossed a coin and then write an order down and put it in the box. So it's a nice psychological thing when there's that guesswork situation.
Oh yeah.
But that's the only way I've used the coin. When I heard about this, my thought was that's a really good play from Adam because if the coin comes in his favor, there's a decent chance that you will actually hand the dots over to him.
100%.
And if the coin doesn't come down in his favor, he's still under no obligation to hand the dots over to you. So it's kind of like he's got I would say, let's call it a 40% chance of being given dots and then a 50% chance of having to lie to you and stab you anyway, or kind of thing. So, I'd take that over, as you say, I'd take that 40% chance over a 0 chance anyway. So, yeah, I thought that was a good negotiating tactic. I would, if I was on the receiving end of that offer, I would be very wary of trusting it. I don't know.
Well, right, especially when he didn't want to flip the coin right away, which I think is the part left out of the DBN broadcast because, I took that as an idea that he would be jockeying for position. I wasn't exactly sure what he was going to do here.
Given that it's 1905 here, that's 3 years till the end of the game.
6 moves.
And you've already got 3 centers to catch up to England, right? So
right.
This really is the sort of almost the last chance to make that move and say, okay, where are those? And, it's not like he's stopping at 10, right?
and he's got more in his sights.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So you
this
need
is
50
why.
steps up, and then you need to get more than he's gained in the meantime. So it really needs to be now or never.
So
So
this is
yeah,
why now that I think I had leverage a little bit on Adam by doing this, and he's berating me and he's mad, and I understand that in the room, is when I told him, "What? Okay, let's flip the coin. Like everything you say can be rectified by your suggestion of the coin flip. Right now." And I would have held my word to it, but as it turns out, I won the coin flip and he didn't, which I don't begrudge him at all. Uh, but I did get a little catty with him when I said, "Well, you're not an honorable man. I'm just go and admit to the rest of the board you're not a man of honor." And he wouldn't do it, and he wouldn't admit it to the board. And I finally got him to admit that he agreed not to, that he did lie about the coin flip to the board. But what are you going to do? I had fun with it, and I wanted to leave having a good experience if I couldn't win. And I think I got a good experience. I mean, I play diplomacy for fun. My wife told me I needed a hobby. My normal life is very stressful. I just do this as a personal improvement project.
yeah, and I mean what you said earlier about with these moves you've maybe got a 30% chance of beating Bill, whereas if you keep doing what you were doing, you've got like a 0% chance. I think that's exactly right. I think you had to do something. Carrying on doing the same thing wasn't going to work for you. You had to do something different. And
Well, I think the
I
thing
think the
that
wood
no one's
elf
pointing
is a
out is
so yeah,
look at Nicola's line.
yeah,
I mean, I'm just looking at it going, where is, my next dot coming from? Where's dot 8 for Austria? It's not a purple dot.
yeah,
No chance.
yeah. I mean, you might get one eventually, but you're probably looking at a guess between Warsaw, Moscow, and you need
Right.
that guess to happen right away, right? You need to get that
Right.
right. Whereas otherwise, if you go for the yellow dots, there's more than one there, right? So yeah, no, I think that was the right decision. As you say, is it guaranteed you'll finish ahead of Bill? No, of course not. But is there a chance? Yeah, there's a chance.
So,
You've got to take the chance over the no chance.
well, I hope, Chris, I wanted to thank you for, coming on and talking about the game and to not offer an apology as much of an explanation for why things happened on my end of it, because I found you then and now such a gentleman, and it's been a pleasure talking to you about this game. And I look forward to Cascadia. Why don't you talk about Cascadia a bit that you're having in January?
Yeah, so I one of my sort of give back to the hobby things was I started running a tournament in Vancouver. I think this year, so it happened in January. So it did actually happen face to face this year. I think it was the 4th year that we've held it, if I remember correctly. It will be happening in January on the 30th. It will not be face to face this time because borders are still going to be closed, I expect, and we're all going to be shut in at home anyway. So it will be a 2-round virtual face-to-face style tournament. I'm not as much of a glutton for punishment as Dave. I'm not going to do some multi 5-round tournament or something. I'm going to keep it nice and simple and easy. So it'll be 2 rounds. We will crown a victor at the end of those 2 rounds based on the whoever does best over those 2 rounds. I haven't completely decided all the details of timing and scoring and stuff like that. I'm working on that stuff as well. But
Have you considered what Dave said? I did not realize, partly because there's so many messages on Discord and I just don't catch up typically, but that he wanted a lot of video conferencing during the games to try and approximate as best as possible face-to-face play, which I would have loved doing. Do you have any thoughts on whether or not you want to encourage video play or keep it as it's kind of been the paradigm?
So I think that Discord, the video support from Discord is not really there for actual gameplay. I think it just takes too long to sort of establish the video connections and tear them down again. And when you've got that 15-minute deadline, you can't afford to spend 5 of that setting up video links and tearing them down again. So I think it's going to be audio for negotiations. I am going to make sure that there are a decent number of sort of general rooms that people can head off into and those, I would encourage people to use video chat for those. I think it does make a lot of difference to, you know, just hearing a voice is very different to seeing people's faces and seeing the body language and stuff like that. And we are a community, and you know, if you keep members of a community apart for long enough, then the community starts to have problems. And I'm hoping we can avoid that happening. And I think that having more of those sort of smaller chats in ideally with video would be a helpful thing from that point of view. Yeah.
One of the things I liked about DixieCon, which was my first ever tournament of any sort other than online, was it was the Wild West of communication. I played, I was Austrian. Eddie Brisson, who I admire a lot, but never played with, was Russia. I played next to Italy. Italy would only video chat. Eddie Brisson is like, I'm not doing any of that. Here is my home telephone number. You were to call this number when you want to talk to me. So I would have, you know, Italy on video with Eddie on my cell phone, going through speakerphone, talking to everybody. I mean, it was hysterical.
I had the same thing. I had some people I was negotiating with by text messages, basically, and some people with video chat, and some people were audio, and it was all over the place. Eddie's known for that, actually. I understand before the internet, when games were played by actual postal mail, Eddie was the person who would sometimes phone someone up, you know, actual long distance phone call at the time to negotiate a particularly important turn or something. So you would suddenly get this phone call from Eddie about whether you were going to support him into Belgium or not or something.
I can't wait to meet him in person. I had the best conversation ever with him. I stabbed him and we worked it out. Then I stabbed him again. And he said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, Eddie, I don't really know what I'm doing, but you just had an interview with Chris Martin on YouTube that said the #1 lesson is when you stab someone, keep going. So I just took your advice and did what you told me to do." And he goes, "Okay, that's worth something." So, Chris, thanks. I don't want to take on too much of your time, but it's been very educational for me. A real pleasure. I can't wait to play with you or watch you comment again. And I will be at Cascadia and hopefully get to chat and interact with you there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our next game together. Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome. And thanks to diplomacybriefing.com, where you can get all the latest news on diplomacy.